The U.S. withholds aid for Palestinian refugees. The Trump administration says the UN agency responsible for the money needs reform. Palestinians say they are being punished for defying the U.S. over Jerusalem. So is humanitarian aid being used for political blackmail? This is Inside Story. Welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. UNRWA, or to give it its full title, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, is funded almost entirely by voluntary contributions from UN members. The U.S. is the single largest donor and gave more than $350 million last year. Its first installment for 2018 was due this month. But this week, the Trump administration cut in half the $125 million it had pledged. In addition, it suspended $45 million in emergency food aid it had promised in December. This all follows President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and his threats to cut aid unless Palestinian leaders agree to resume talks. Imran Khan has more from the Gaza Strip.
This house is typical of many in the Gaza Strip. Now, currently, there's an electricity blackout. They get electricity blackouts for about 12 hours a day. Now, the US is withholding food aid, but what does that actually mean? Well, UNRWA supply things like this, sacks of flour, rice, etc. It's the basics that they supply. Now, they only supply them about once every 3 months. So a sack of flour about this big needs to last a family of 9 for that long. So there's already acute shortages.
For sure we are worried, because this is the only help we have to be able to live. We have no choice. Where else are we supposed to get food from? We can't buy it. We can't work. There is no work. If they decrease the aid, what shall we do?
There's about 2 million people in the Gaza Strip. Now, about 1.1 million of those people rely on food aid in some way or another. It's people like these that are going to be affected the most. Now, the US president has said that he wants changes to the way UNRWA operates. He also wants the international community to step up and donate a lot more aid. He said that the US is very generous, but other countries need to step up. However, by withholding it, he's actually taking food away from people like these.
UNRWA is now facing its worst financial crisis, and a funding shortfall will have major implications for Palestinian refugees in the Middle East. The agency operates in 5 areas: Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, the Gaza Strip, and the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Almost 6 million registered refugees receive basic and social services that rely heavily on outside funding. UNRWA has set up 702 schools in the region with more than 500,000 students, half of them girls. And UNRWA doctors see 9 million patients in 143 primary health clinics every year. Let's bring in our panel. From Ramallah, Ammar Hijazi, Palestine's Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs. From Amman in Jordan, Karl Schembri, a regional spokesman for the Norwegian Refugee Council. And from Washington, D.C., Graham Bannerman, former Middle East analyst at the State Department. Welcome to you all. Now, Ammar, I want to start with you. What is the way forward now for Palestinian leadership?
Well, the way forward is clear for the Palestinian leadership. It is continuing on with believing and investing in a peace process that is based on international legitimacy, on international law, on UN resolutions, and the well-known terms of reference, as well as continuing to defend the Palestinian people's rights at all fronts, including the international level, by using peaceful and legitimate tools.
Karl, I want to ask you about the humanitarian impact. Tell us about the immediate effects on the ground from a decision like this.
We are extremely concerned that the impact of this decision is going to be spread and felt across the region, from Gaza and the West Bank to Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria, where millions, up to 5 million Palestinian refugees depend on UNRWA. UNRWA is the only lifeline for these families. 500,000 children across the region go to UNRWA schools. I was just in touch with my colleagues in Lebanon, and where they were in Burj al-Shamali refugee camp. They were telling me about the mother of 5 children. She had a C-section, which saved her life, because UNRWA could provide her the medical services to have it. She couldn't afford it otherwise. She has 5 children going to school at UNRWA schools, and they now face the prospect, the bleak prospect of having no school to go to. The very shelter, the housing that refugees get across the region are largely UNRWA houses and flats and shelters that have been built for Palestinian refugees. The impact is completely unthinkable what is happening now. For UNRWA to start the year with half of its budget withheld by the U.S. administration is just unthinkable. It's unheard of. And our appeal, urgent appeal, is for the U.S. administration to reconsider and reverse its decisions, but also to other international donors to step in and help Palestinian refugees in this really difficult moment.
Graham, is this a case of Palestine and Palestinian leaders being punished for pushing back against U.S. President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel?
No, I think this is the administration, which is totally unconventional, saying that this process has not moved forward in a quarter century. It needs to move forward, and we have an agenda to do that. The agenda reflects what I think is some of the views of the most zealous supporters of Israel, in that Jerusalem is always going to be Israel's capital. Let's take that off the table, so we don't need to negotiate that. The Palestinian refugees are not going to go back to Israel, and UNRWA only perpetuates this situation and has made it worse over the years by the growing numbers of Palestinians. So let's force them to address that issue too. And this is all necessary from their perspective in order to address the peace process, so the other issues like border security and sovereignty can be addressed in the negotiations.
Graham, what other issues is the Trump administration trying to get? What other guarantees are they trying to get from either UNRWA or from Palestinian leadership here?
Oh, I'm not sure they're looking for guarantees. I think they see the process as stagnant, and it's being held up by issues. I think my own view is, my personal view, which is different, is that the peace process has been stagnant since 1996, because before 96, when the peace process moved forward in 79 or Madrid or Oslo, what happened was there was always a confrontation between the United States and Israel in public, that because the Americans are the only ones that can convince the Israelis to make concessions that otherwise they don't think possible. After 96, the United States decided not to do that. We want to reassure the Israelis. We want to make sure they're comfortable, so we don't force them to make hard decisions. We comfort them into making the decisions that are necessary. That hasn't worked in the last 20-some years. And I think, but the Trump administration is changing that game plan and saying, no, we have a way to go forward. It's very much like the more zealous supporters of Israel want to implement.
Ammar, what is your response to what Graham is saying? And also, do you see this as a form of political blackmail by the Trump administration?
Well, our response was very clear. I mean, given that this administration has completely adopted and mirrored Israeli positions and is taking off very important and crucial issues to the Palestinian people off the table, which is not for it to take off the table or to put on the table for that matter. The response of the leadership was very clear, that the U.S. is no more qualified to play any role in this peace process, and the Palestinians will not listen to any or abide by any peace plan that the U.S. will be imposing, which does not have the issue of Jerusalem or the issue of refugees in it, because these are the most important issues to the Palestinian peoples, and there is no plan, neither this leadership nor any future leadership, to ignore these issues or put them off the table as the Trump administration is trying to do. And as such, we are trying to adopt measures along with other international partners to relaunch a peace process that is in line with what has been agreed on, upon which the basis of this peace process has been launched. including the issue of Jerusalem, of course, and the rights of refugees, as explained in 194.
Ammar, I was in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank when this was first hinted at on January 2nd. And we went to refugee camps, we went to a clinic that was helping refugees, and they were saying, we don't have any other outlet. We have no other place we can go where we can get medical aid, where we can get the attention that we need. But they were also expressing to me a frustration with the Palestinian leadership as well, saying that they didn't believe they were doing enough. I mean, what is your response to the Palestinians on the ground there?
Well, it's fully understandable that people are frustrated. We have engaged in this peace process along with our partners, one of which was the American administration, which has been a major player in this peace process. And at the end, you were faced by the grim reality that this current administration has dropped everything that we were promising our people with, including living in peace and prosperity in their own land with no occupation in their land. Now, that is understandable, but that should not make us lose hope or focus. And the Palestinian people continue to stand by their leadership in the steps that it will be taking in the future as we move forward in defense of their rights. Now, yes, the reality will be difficult, and unfortunately, the U.S. administration took the decision to punish those who are most vulnerable amongst the Palestinian population. And by the way, UNRWA is neither linked or related to the Palestinian government. This is an institution that was established without the presence of the Palestinian people. It was established as a responsibility by the international community, including the US, which had a responsibility to respect and implement certain international resolutions. And those promises has been kept within this institution, which has proved to be reliable, responsible, and an honest institution. Unfortunately, this decision will only serve to unravel the situation. It will contribute further to instability in the region, and it will target only those who are most vulnerable. And we know the consequences of such a step.
Karl, UNRWA, of course, is appealing for funds urgently. Belgium this week announced that they were pledging, I believe, $23 million to UNRWA. Do you expect other international players to step up now?
Well, we do urge international donors to step in where the U.S. has left this massive shortfall. But let me also remind our viewers here that the UNRWA has been actually relieving Israel as the occupying power of its responsibility towards the refugees. It is ultimately Israel, together with the government of Lebanon and Jordan and inside Syria, who are taking care of refugees outside of Israel and Palestine. But ultimately it is Israel who has been getting these services for people under its responsibility according to international humanitarian law. So at the end of the day, this measure punishes the most vulnerable, as the previous speaker said. It punishes the ones who are dispossessed, who are stateless, who have nowhere else to go and nowhere to resort to in terms of services. But it is also going to have a direct impact on Israel and the other countries, surrounding countries that are hosting the Palestinian refugees. It is in everyone's interest that this shortfall is covered immediately. Other international donors, we urge them to come in. We urge the American administration. This is one of the most despicable ways of politicizing aid, of depriving those who need that aid so desperately just to make a political point, for which those very victims, and this is actually blaming the victims, have no say in. They have no say in whether the Palestinian leadership goes or not back to the negotiating table. They are the ones who are the victims of this decades-long festering wound, which is the Israeli-Palestinian question.
Graham, since the beginning almost of the Trump administration, there has been seemingly this disconnect between the White House and the State Department, contradictory messages on so many vital diplomatic issues. Do you believe that this disconnect is causing more difficulties when it comes to the Palestinian issue?
Oh, I think the disconnect is real because I think the Trump administration is trying to break the mold of how we've done things. And having been a State Department person, we have a way we do things at State Department, and we have a way things are done. But all of a sudden, they're saying, no, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do things differently. And this is very disturbing. You can see it in the State Department itself feels it's under siege. It doesn't feel as effective. They're demoralized. And this is unfortunate because in the end, if there's going to be the United States playing a role in international affairs, the State Department has to be part of the role, a crucial part, and the administration has to take the lead rather than disagreeing with them. May I say one thing about UNRWA? I think what has been lost for decades is, and I agree with the previous speaker in that, is that the problem was not that the Palestinians left their homes when the fighting occurred in independence for Israel, but that the Israelis did not let them return. Returning to your home after the battle is over is guaranteed under international law, and therefore the international community created UNRWA to solve the problem since they couldn't go home. And the perpetuation of UNRWA has perpetuated that issue out there. So from the Israeli perspective, as long as UNRWA exists, and as long as the Palestinians are kept in camps and under this refugee status, the Palestinian refugee problem will haunt them, and therefore they need to get rid of it. I think the tragedy is, as everybody has pointed out, is the people who suffer are the Palestinian refugees and their children and their grandchildren. It is a terrible situation, but UNRWA itself is just a perpetuation of a bad situation.
Ammar, what's your response to what Graham just said? And also, what regional support at this point does Palestine have in standing up to the U.S.?
Well, it's certainly the situation with the current administration is extremely unpredictable, and the way decisions are made are divorcing with the decades-long policies that has been implemented, including in relation to UNRWA. And unfortunately, this is certainly unraveling the situation and leading to sudden changes, which are most of the time interrupting and violent in a way. In addition to that, in relation to UNRWA, the perpetuation of the problem was the failure of the international community, and on top of them, those who aided and abetted the Israeli colonial enterprise in Palestine and not allowed for the refugees to return back to their homes, which is a norm that is respected everywhere else in the world, on the basis that this will demographically change the reality in Israel, which is, if you wish, a very racist notion, because they are the landowners. They had nothing to do with this colonial enterprise that has been implemented and decided on elsewhere, not by the Palestinian people, who were not consulted, unfortunately, and was decided by the UN and the US and the big nations were involved in this since the beginning. And as such, UNRWA was in a way paying conscience money to those who suffered from this colonial enterprise, without thinking of their fate and not really helping them in a proper way to return to their homes and to live their normal lives. These are people who owned lands, who owned homes, who lived normal life and had nothing to do with any kind of feuds around the world, and they paid a very heavy price for something that was plotted and implemented somewhere else. And this is exactly why UNRWA continues to be crucial and important, simply because the rights of the refugees are not only aid and paying for their education and health, etc., but it's also continuing to preserve the collective identity of the refugees, which is an important one. And in relation to any political aspirations, it's reflected by the Palestinian government and the representatives of the Palestinian people, and UNRWA has nothing to do with that. As such, they cannot be punished or tormented the way they are bullied now because of decisions that are taken at the political level. And the least to say, this is vindicative and it's not going to serve any purpose except unraveling the situation.
Karl, I'd like you to guide our viewers a little bit more through how this impacts Palestinians and refugees, and not just there, but also in places like Lebanon and Jordan, where there are so many Palestinian refugees?
As you said, the Palestinian refugees are scattered around in Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria. Let's not forget, an active war zone where Palestinian refugees who have been living there are caught either under siege, they're caught in the crossfire, different militias, the government forces, and they are the only #1 service provider for these people. The one lifeline that they have is called UNRWA, and this is what is under attack here. This is the #1. There is nobody, not the Norwegian Refugee Council, nor any other agency, humanitarian organization out there that can pick up the pieces and deliver in the extent of the services that UNRWA delivers for the Palestinians. It's the only agency that provides them from food aid to health services to education to shelter, anything that they need. They've already been suffering massive cuts in the last years. Budgets have been going down. There are too many crises in this region. This just comes on top of all that, and it's really going to spell disaster if that shortfall is not covered. I've seen with my own eyes the harsh conditions Palestinians live in Lebanese camps and Palestinian camps in Lebanon. Syrians, Palestinians in Syria, we've all seen the images coming out of Yarmouk camp, caught between different fighting groups and forces. Nobody else is delivering services but UNRWA. We at the Norwegian Refugee Council work very closely with UNRWA in schools where we do psychosocial support. For example, in Gaza, where children have been living for under a siege for more than a decade now, and multiple conflicts, multiple wars, traumatized, completely traumatized. That's the kind of services we're offering because UNRWA offers the space where we can work with them. We work with in the West Bank with Palestinians whose houses are being demolished by the Israeli occupation all the time, and UNRWA is providing them basic services. We provide legal services for those people. These are all, so we're really talking a vast spectrum of services and people across the board that are going to be affected here, and the earlier this shortfall is covered, the more the crisis can be averted. One other thing, if a crisis happens, as we've seen multiple times, especially in the Gaza Strip, which tends to be prone to a lot of the Israeli military's aggressions, UNRWA again is the #1 agency that steps in. UNRWA has been rebuilding the houses destroyed in the last war in 2014. There are still people out there living in tents because there haven't been enough funding and the process has been very slow. UNRWA has been rebuilding their houses. We've been helping them again legally in ascertaining their ownership of the houses. If there is an emergency right now, there will be nobody to pick up the pieces.
Graham, I'm going to leave you with the last word here very quickly. Is there any chance from your vantage point that the Trump administration changes their mind on this?
There's always a chance with the Trump administration that they will change their mind. But I think this fits their policy goals and objectives for the peace process. They want to get on to the other issues and want to discuss them, and they think they can resolve it. I think it's not going to work the way they want, but they've done things that I never thought were possible in the past, and I thought were unacceptable in the past, but they've still done them.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Thanks to all our guests, Ammar Hijazi, Karl Schembri, and Graham Bannerman, and thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the whole team here, bye for now.